Hi, and welcome to my ranking of all of Christopher Nolan's films. Now that Oppenheimer's been out for like 3 weeks, I wanted to talk about one of my favorite directors, Christopher Nolan. I know that's not a very niche opinion, a lot of people feel that way, and that's why I like him, because he's able to balance big budget films that people go see, but he still very much has a style, and people who love film, cinephiles, can still enjoy a lot of his work. I think he has a very good middle ground when it comes to creating a story for the mainstream and for the snob. So I'm gonna talk about all of his movies, and to me, I'm gonna rank them from my least favorite to my favorite, and I say the word favorite because I don't think any of his movies are bad. I think all of them have value to them, even the ones that are on the lower end of the list. I still think they're good. I just think the ones at the top are the very best. And if I talk about one of your films and it's only for like a minute or two, because I don't want this video to be too long, I would love to hear your opinions, love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Not to waste any more time, let's jump right into it. At number 12, I have Following, his neo-noir independent film, his debut film. And even though it's at the bottom of the list, I do recommend people to go watch it simply because it is the roots of everything that he does. There's a non-linear story structure, there's a focus of masculinity and a man trying to find his way in the world. It talks about perception and memory and how the things around us affect us and how they define us. The only thing that I really would say that's holding it back is its budget. You can tell it was made with a low budget from the lighting, and that's probably why it was in black and white, and you can tell that a lot of the actors and scenes were rushed. Even though it's like an hour and like 11 minutes, pretty short runtime, it does drag a little bit in the middle. But like I said earlier, it's great to see the little seedlings that he plants in his filmography, and especially after watching Oppenheimer, his latest film, it is amazing just to see the journey of his career. I think it's still a great film, and there's a lot to be proud of in this one. At number 11, I've got Insomnia. Now, this is also another one that people forget that Christopher Nolan even made. It's about a man who goes to Alaska to solve a murder, and that's about it. And if you're thinking that's a pretty basic premise, it's because the movie is pretty basic in its execution. It is interesting to see the main actors play these roles, though. They really kill it here. Al Pacino and Robin Williams as our protagonists do a really good job, especially Robin Williams. He usually does a more happier role, a more lighthearted role, a comedy role, but here he plays a pure villain, a pure evil, and it really is nice to see him outside of his wheelhouse. Al Pacino also does a really good job. He's always good at portraying these morally gray people, morally gray characters. The only problem is that it's not that there's a lot that's wrong with the film. It's just that there's not a lot that's great about the film. It even feels weird kind of bashing on it just because it is your average run-of-the-mill. I still recommend it. I recommend anything on this list. Give this one a chance just so you can get a taste of what Christopher Nolan was before he went more into the PG-13. There's more cursing in this one, there's more violence, there's more bloodshed. It is really interesting to see how he used to be and how he's kind of dipped his toe back into that with Oppenheimer. At number 10, I have Batman Begins. And I know some of you are gonna get upset that I put a Batman film this low on the list, but even though The Dark Knight Rises is a little bit messy when it comes to plotting and characters, The Batman Begins very much feels like a baby step. Christopher Nolan is definitely playing it a little bit safer with a larger budget and a stronger IP. He's definitely not pushing the boundaries. A perfect example is the cinematography. Even though there are some great iconic moments, some great iconic shots here, there's not much left to be desired. Especially after seeing the new Batman film by Matt Reeves, each shot is just oozing with darkness, oozing with this grimy feeling of Gotham, and Batman fits into that mold. Where here in The Batman Begins, you can tell most of the stuff was just shot for convenience of relaying information instead of maximizing the story or the vibe of the character. I will say Christian Bale does a great performance and does establish the character, a character that's full of pain and grief, and how he overcomes those things and becomes more of an ideal, and really solidifies Batman as the symbol in this trilogy, which is a good first step, but a safe one. At number 9, I have Tenet. And while Tenet probably needs a rewatch, if I'm being honest, many of the things I didn't like about it are not going to change with a rewatch. Many people complain that Christopher Nolan's characters are very one note and they lack a lot of depth, which to a certain extent is true, but my problem with this film is that the concept that is usually the driving force, if the character or the main actor is not as interesting, but the concept is really fleshed out and super interesting, or the storyline is really engaging, I'm fine with the main character being a little bit more stereotypical. But here, the concept of time reversal is really confusing. And while the movie says to not think about it, but feel it, it also spends a lot of time making me think about it and explaining it. So I've got a conflict of interest here when it comes to what the movie wants me to do. And so the lack of a main character, one that's really, in depth, something that you can really sink your teeth into, really brings the movie down, especially since he doesn't even have a name. His name is just listed as the protagonist in the script or in the credit, which makes it very hard to engage with such high concepts without any main character. I very much feel like I'm outside of the movie trying to understand something that the movie doesn't seem to fully understand. At the end, the action, as always, technically and practically, is always amazing with Christopher Nolan. He never fails to deliver when it comes to something looking fantastic when it comes to action. I just wish the movie focused more on showing and not telling when it gives me this mixed bag here. I'm also really tired of Russians being the go-to big bad for all action films, especially when they're so over the top and dramatic. Still a great theater experience. Even as I'm saying this, I'm thinking of rewatching it. Maybe I'll change my mind. At number 8, I have The Dark Knight Rises. And right off the bat, I will say there was no way that Christopher Nolan was going to live up to the hype of The Dark Knight. A lot of people critique this movie and bash this movie for the smallest little inconvenient things. And while I do have some problems with the movie, overall, it's just fun. Very quotable, exciting characters, and you can tell that Christopher Nolan put a lot of love into this. He definitely had the mindset of go big or go home, even if all the pieces don't land correctly as he wanted to. Now, what problems do I have with it? One example would be Bane. While I think he is a great villain when it comes to tone and presentation, I feel like he's lacking with the motivation. I don't really understand what he's trying to do or how people rally around him. Also, I don't think he has a compelling character arc that matches Batman at all, like it does in The Dark Knight with the Joker. That scene in the stadium where it collapses, while it's a very cool shot, I don't know how a terrorist attack could motivate a city to rally behind a person. He talks about being a liberator, even though he just blew up like a stadium full of people, and it's just never talked about afterwards. So I feel like there's moments like this that are not really mentioned in the plot, they're kind of just skipped over. But like I said, overall, this movie is just a lot of fun. There are some loose ends like the Robin thread line, and the whole nuclear bomb business very much feels a little bit goofy and over the top. But overall, I do still like this movie. It is part of the greatest Batman trilogy ever, and it has that legacy holding it up, and it is nice to just sit back and enjoy something and not have to think about it too much. At number 7, we have Dunkirk. No major battle war movie where the danger comes from the basic needs of survival. Now, I wish I would have watched this in the theaters because I could tell when I was watching this at home, my system was not doing it any justice. As time goes on, Christopher Nolan tries to implement more and more sympathy for humans. I very much liked seeing that, especially in a story like this. Usually war films or historical films are taught about the greatest man to exist at that time, or the greatest person doing something crazy, inventing something crazy, or winning some crazy battle. But here we see the struggle of everyday men. You see the men trying to survive. They trust inside these structures that quickly turn on them, like the bridge and the boat. These things that are usually made for safety end up causing them more danger than helping. And it also shows how average men that want to do the right thing have to risk a lot to even do it with the people on the boat. It really shows that fear is not some big scary monster or some evil villain around the corner, but the little doubts and fears that we plant inside of our minds that cause us to suffer more there than anywhere else. It also shows just the pure will and strength humanity has to do the right thing, that we're all called to go and help one another, even at the risk of our own lives. The only critique I would give this film is that while it is engaging to watch, I do not feel like I am one of the people inside the movie. I definitely feel like I'm an outside observer witnessing something that is not a part of me, which is really upset to see because it is a very compelling story. I just wish that maybe it's something with the editing, maybe something to do with the way that it's shot, but I wish there was more of a way that it could drag me in and make me one of the soldiers. At number 6, I've got the man of the hour himself, Oppenheimer. Now I placed this somewhere near the middle because I don't think it's one of Christopher Nolan's best, and I don't think it's one of his worst. He does return to the rated R rating here, and he does kind of take his leeway with that. He does go a little bit overboard. In my opinion, on some of the stuff there, I feel like it was a little bit unnecessary. It was a little bit comical how much he put it in there. But regardless from that, I do like how this story is about Oppenheimer, the man, and how he thinks and how he views the world. It's not about the war, it's not about the Japanese, it's not about the bomb. It's about him and his life experience, what he thought, his politics, his pains, his feelings, how he saw the bomb before he built it, how he felt about the bomb after he built it, how he created himself as some kind of martyr, some kind of victim of his own creation, and how people made fun of him for thinking that way. And also just how different he was before he built the bomb, how he was conflicted about it, you know, especially after the Nazis were defeated. You know, was it worth it for the Japanese? He kind of had a resentment for the Nazis because of what they did to his people. So it's really interesting seeing him play off of his thoughts and how he views the world as time goes on, as he gains more information, as he gets older. It is really interesting. It is 3 hours long, but it was still a really good time, and I'm glad I watched it in the theaters. I will rewatch it after I read the book to see if it gave me any more context or made me enjoy it anymore. At number 5, I have Interstellar, and Interstellar is sci-fi in its truest form. A lot of people, when they talk about this, they either like it or it's their absolute favorite movie of all time. Not their favorite Nolan film, their favorite movie regardless. I will say when I first watched this, a lot of it went over my head. For example, the time dilation was a metaphor for how Christopher Nolan feels when he leaves his family to go work on another project, and how much that emphasizes the father-daughter relationship in the movie. Now that I'm an adult and I've seen these kind of things, I'm not a father, but I see the message and the clear intent that Christopher Nolan is trying to put between these characters. It's amazing what can go over some people's heads while go right into other people's hearts. And this movie definitely does that. This is his most emphasis on love and caring and what it can do beyond time and space. That love can extend even when we're not right next to each other. It's definitely his most humane film. Also, Hans Zimmer's score here is just the best. Many of the scenes aren't even being carried by what the actors are doing or by the dialogue, but it's slowly being guided by the hand of the music. It's a masterpiece. My boy Matthew McConaughey also gives an iconic role and gives us a meme for the ages. The only very small critique, and I feel so bad even mentioning it because it's so tiny, is that sometimes there is just too much dialogue explaining and giving us an interpretation of the scenes that we see. I feel like a movie like this that talks about the vastness of space and about love can be left a little bit more open-ended than some of his other films, like Inception. It just pulls away from the emotion of the film and the otherworldliness that you feel entering into this strange space reality. At number 4, I have Memento. And this is such a great small film. I love that Christopher Nolan had the audacity to make such a crazy story. Memento, literally meaning to remember, is about how small and blindsided our small worldview can be. A man that forgets everything after 15 minutes searches for his wife's killer. Nolan is able to take concepts like memory and bring them to the absolute extremes without ever overjumping the audience's expectations. Leonard is a man who has built up his own importance in the world. We see how he has conditioned himself to still believe in the fantasy that his wife's killer is still out there, and how it's just one big lie that he continues to perpetually tell himself. Showing that even in ourselves, how little action or how little events it takes us to think that the world owes us something, or to justify our own worldview. How we can never really remove that bias from the cold hard facts of our world. That line where he says, "I'm chasing this man, no, this man is chasing me," is very comical, but also reveals the purpose of the film. That as we experience life, we build a story for ourselves to live in, and how we don't really truly know anything that we've seen or done. This is something you could rewatch and rewatch over and over again, if only just to see Nolan explain how he came up with this crazy story. I have no critiques of it, I just love the next 3 even more. At number 3, I have The Dark Knight, and this is probably still the best superhero film to date. It's so iconic and it stands at the center of every teenage boy's edgy phase in high school. This is what I mean when I say that Bane lacks a cohesive theme that runs parallel to Batman. Here, the Batman is order, justice, with meaningful ideals, while the Joker stands for chaos, evil, and the lack of meaning only extends to his general whims. Heath Ledger's performance here in this movie has been talked endlessly, and for good reason. There's so many memorable moments with him, so many quotable lines, and of course, Joker impressions to fail at.
Well, I'm the Joker, baby!
This movie is such a cultural landmark that you know that in 5 to 10 years, people will hate it just because it's popular. If you really wanted to, you could go on YouTube right now and you could find someone breaking down any scene, any moment, any frame, because there's just so much packed into this movie. Nolan really brought in so many things together. It's almost like a lightning bolt struck and was able to make everything land just perfectly. I love that it shows the strength and weaknesses of human morality. The Joker is the type of villain to give advice through an insult. And while he's true to a certain extent when it comes to the goodness of the people and how easily people are corrupted, including Harvey, he's ultimately wrong about the heart of people. And Batman struggling with his own ethics and trying to make sense of someone who has none is really entertaining to watch and shows just how hard it is to be a good person. Inception is at number 2, and I can happily say this defined my teenage years and was also the standard I would be giving for any entertainment that I would be watching for the next couple of years. Inception had such a great impact on the film industry when it came to action, meta commentary, and of course, the gigantic boom effect. I remember watching and rewatching it, looking to anyone or anything that would talk about that ending, or how the heist crew is similar to a film crew, and how the movie itself is planting an idea into the audience. Everything that Memento talks about when it comes to facing the subjectivity of our reality, Inception with a larger budget is not just able to tell us about it, but show us. This is the best combination Nolan has ever had with concept and visual storytelling. Everything here is shooting at a 10. And it's crazy that how this came out in 2011 and it still looks better than most modern day blockbuster films. Leo is at the best of his ability here, and I still can't believe how long it took him to win an Oscar. But the real strength of the movie is that it's able to take something that we all experience, dreams. We think about them, we share them with each other, but we don't fully understand them. And it's able to plant it in a system of science without letting go of that wonder that we all feel about them. Everybody who watched this thought about the world that they would build if they had unlimited power. And even with all this sci-fi heist stuff, the center of the story is about loss and grief, about a man who has lost part of his family, fighting for the only future where he can have it with the remaining parts of it, not caring whether it's real or fake. Ultimately, the movie reveals that we do not think in linear, rational streams, but we build worlds where our dreams can come true, and how film is a mirror into that world. At number 1, I have The Prestige, and the way that I got to that conclusion is that around this time is where I stopped watching movies just for entertainment. This is where I started studying them, analyzing them, and really thinking about them. But it's also something that even as I watched as a child, I enjoy now as an adult. A lot of the movies that you watch when you're a kid, especially when you look back, are just full of joy and nostalgia. But many of us could admit that not all of them are up to par to what we would consider good nowadays. But we enjoy them because they're from our childhood. But this is something that fell right in between that spot of me transitioning from a kid to maybe a teenager or a young adult. And I still enjoy it till this day. Mainly because it's about 2 extravagant magicians battling for who can make the best magic trick. And then when they talk about magic, they're not just talking about tricks, but about filmmaking. And then they extend that metaphor to life and how we live it. Both of them aren't just trying to be great magicians, but both are trying to search for a way out of a world that they know is magicless, solid all the way through. Rewatch it a couple of times and you'll see the tricks and the misdirections. Rewatch it enough and you'll be able to see past the cool turns and twists and see 2 men battling for the very purpose of living, of sacrifice, of reality. And that's why I love this movie, because it's able to talk about so much without ever sounding grandiose or pretentious. If you just want to watch a mystery or enjoy a thriller, you can just do that. But if you want more, it's there. So it makes me happy to know that a movie from my childhood that captured so much my imagination still captures it till this day. Not to mention the great performances, costuming, period piece location, and Tesla. Not to mention it also hates Thomas Edison. And that ending is just fantastic. But that's my personal ranking. What do you think? Leave your list down below, or your favorite Nolan film, or tell me how much you hate my list or my personal favorite down below. Thank you for watching. Hope to see you soon.